You know what the worst part about betrayal is? It's not the knife in your back. It's realizing the person holding it thinks you're too stupid to notice. My name is Richard Adamson, and I'm 36 years old. 6 months ago, my wife Angela and her millionaire boyfriend stood in my bedroom and called me broke, boring, insufficient. They treated me like I was some obstacle standing between her and her real happiness. Dominic flaunted wealth he didn't actually have while Angela defended their affair. Both of them so certain I'd just accept it and walk away quietly. But here's what they didn't know. I'm a forensic accountant for the IRS. I find money people try to hide. I expose fraud others miss. And when I aimed those skills at destroying them both, Dominic's millions weren't real, and Angela's future wasn't bright. I exposed him as a con artist, built a federal case that sent him to prison for 18 years, and made sure Angela joined him behind bars for 3. I rebuilt my life with someone better while they lost everything: freedom, money, reputation, future. If you've ever been betrayed by someone who underestimated you, this story's for you. Because what follows isn't revenge, it's justice, executed with precision and ruthlessness. But let me start from the beginning. Before I go any further, let me know in the comments where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow I will share a story you don't want to miss. I came home early on a Tuesday because I'd forgotten my laptop charger. Simple mistake. Life-changing consequences. The drive back from the office took 20 minutes through mid-afternoon traffic. I remember thinking about the budget analysis I needed to finish, about whether we needed milk from the store, about absolutely nothing important. Just another Tuesday in a life I thought I understood. I heard them before I saw them. Angela's laugh coming from upstairs, followed by a man's voice I didn't recognize. My first thought wasn't betrayal. My first thought was confusion, like when you walk into a room and forget why you came. We didn't have guests scheduled. Angela should have been at work for another 3 hours. I walked upstairs quietly, not sneaking exactly, just aware that something felt wrong in a way I couldn't name yet. Our bedroom door stood half open. I could see Angela sitting on our bed, the bed we'd picked out together 5 years ago at that furniture warehouse in Sterling, next to a man in an expensive suit. They weren't touching, but the space between them held an intimacy that made my stomach drop. She wore the blue dress I'd bought her for our anniversary last month. "Angela," I said, pushing the door fully open. She jumped like I'd fired a gun. The man, mid-40s, salt and pepper hair, wearing a watch that probably cost more than my car, didn't even flinch. He just looked at me with this expression of mild annoyance, like I was a waiter who'd interrupted an important conversation. "Richard," Angela said, her face cycling through shock and guilt before settling on something harder. "You're home." "I am home," I said, keeping my voice level despite my heart hammering against my ribs. "In my house. In my bedroom. Who the hell is this?" The man stood up, buttoning his suit jacket with casual confidence. "Dominic Whitmore," he said, not offering his hand. "And before this gets uncomfortable, you should know that Angela and I have been seeing each other for 6 months. 6 months. The number hit me like a physical blow, but I kept my face neutral. 6 months of lies. 6 months of working late and girls' nights, and "I'm just tired, maybe tomorrow." "Get out of my house," I said, looking directly at Dominic. He actually smiled. "Angela, do you want me to leave?" My wife of 8 years, hesitated. That hesitation told me everything I needed to know. "Angela and I are in love," Dominic continued, his tone almost pitying. "She's been trying to find the right time to tell you. I suggested ripping the Band-Aid off, but she was worried about your reaction." "My reaction," I repeated slowly, "to finding my wife's affair partner in my bedroom. See, this is the problem." Dominic gestured at me like I was evidence in a case he was making. "This hostility, this possessiveness, Angela's told me all about your controlling behavior, your financial anxiety, your complete inability to provide her with the life she deserves. I looked at Angela. Is that what you told him? That I'm controlling? She couldn't meet my eyes. Richard, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. I cut her off, my voice rising for the first time. You've been screwing this guy for half a year, and now he's in our house talking to me about what you deserve. Don't raise your voice to her, Dominic said, stepping between us. Look, I get that this is hard for you. Angela married you when she was young, before she understood what real success looked like. You're an accountant making what? $75,000 a year? 80? That's fine for some people. But Angela's meant for more than a suburban starter home, and a husband who thinks Olive Garden is fine dining. The contempt in his voice was so thick I could taste it. And something in me shifted, from hurt to something colder, sharper. My mind clicked into the mode it goes into when I'm tracing hidden assets, when I'm following money trails that people think they've covered. What do you do, Dominic? I asked quietly. I'm an investment advisor, he said. I manage portfolios for high net worth clients. My personal net worth is somewhere north of 12 million. Not that it's any of your business. 12 million, I said. Impressive. What firm? I run my own operation, Whitmore Capital Strategies. I pulled out my phone, typing quickly. Dominic watched me with amusement. Angela looked nervous. Richard, what are you doing? She asked. Just curious, I said, still scrolling. See, I'm a forensic accountant. I work for the IRS, actually. Part of my job is knowing which financial firms are registered, which advisors have their Series 65, that sort of thing. Funny thing, I'm not finding any Whitmore Capital Strategies registered with the SEC. No Series 65 for Dominic Whitmore either. Dominic's smile faltered for just a second. I operate as a private advisor. Different regulations. Right, I said, still calm. Except there's no such thing as a private investment advisor who's exempt from SEC registration if they're managing client money. But hey, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you're one of those guys who only advises friends and family, stays under the threshold. How many clients do you have, Dominic? That's proprietary information. Of course it is. I looked at Angela. How much have you given him? Her face went pale. What? Money, Angela. How much of our money have you given your boyfriend to invest? Dominic's voice went hard. Angela's investment decisions are her own business. Our joint account is my business, I said. Angela, I asked you a question. She looked at Dominic, then back at me. $40,000 from my inheritance. The money her grandmother had left her. The money we'd agreed to save for our future. Maybe for kids, if we decided to have them. 40,000, I repeated. And what kind of returns are you seeing on that? 15% annually, Dominic said quickly. Better than anything your typical index fund would deliver. 15% guaranteed returns, I said, nodding slowly. You know what that sounds like to a forensic accountant, Dominic. That sounds like a Ponzi scheme. His face darkened. You're going to stand there and insult me in front of the woman I love? I'm going to stand in my own bedroom and call a fraud. A fraud, I shot back. You're not a registered investment advisor. You're promising guaranteed returns that are impossibly high. And you're targeting vulnerable people, people like my wife, with promises of wealth and a better life. How many other clients are you running this scam on? Richard, stop, Angela said, but her voice was weak. I could see doubt creeping into her expression. Does he take you to nice restaurants, Angela? Buy you expensive gifts? Funny how a guy with $12 million doesn't seem to have an office address I can find. Doesn't have any public records of property ownership. Doesn't have... Shut your mouth, Dominic snarled, the polished veneer cracking completely. You're a bitter, broke little man who can't handle that your wife found someone better. Better? I laughed, and it was a harsh sound. You're a con artist who picked the wrong mark. See, if you'd done your homework, You would have known that my wife is married to someone who investigates financial fraud for a living. You would have known that I have direct access to federal databases, forensic tools, and a whole network of investigators who'd be very interested in your little operation. You're bluffing, Dominic said, but he was backing toward the door. Try me, I said softly. Walk out that door right now, and maybe, I'll let this slide as a domestic issue. Stay. Keep running your mouth about how broke I am, and I will dedicate every waking hour to dismantling whatever scam you're running. I will find every client you've defrauded. I will trace every dollar, and I will personally hand-deliver your case to the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. The room went silent. Angela was staring at me like she'd never seen me before. Dominic's jaw worked, but no sound came out. Finally, he grabbed his jacket. This isn't over. Yes, it is, I said. You're done with my wife. You're done with her money. And if I find out you've contacted her again, I'm making a phone call that ends with you in federal prison. Do we understand each other? He left without another word. I heard the front door slam a minute later. Angela and I stood in our bedroom, the space between us feeling like miles. Richard, she started. Don't, I said, holding up a hand. Just don't. Not right now. I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't sleep. I went straight to my home office and started running searches. The IRS database was my first stop, then state business registrations, Secretary of State records, court filings, credit reports. I had access to tools most people didn't even know existed. By midnight, I had the basics. Dominic Whitmore existed on paper, but barely. No business registration for Whitmore Capital Strategies, no SEC filings, no FINRA records, nothing that would indicate he was running a legitimate investment operation. By 2 a.m., I'd gone deeper. Found his real name buried in a name change filing from 5 years ago. Dominic Walter. That opened up a whole new search tree. Dominic Walter had a history. Civil fraud complaints in Maryland from 7 years ago. Investors claiming he'd taken their money for a real estate development fund that never materialized. Another complaint in Virginia from 9 years ago. All settled out of court for pennies on the dollar. By 4 a.m., I'd found the shell companies. 3 different LLCs registered in Delaware over the past 5 years. All dissolved after running less than 2 years. Whitmore Capital Strategies wasn't even registered. It was just a name he used. Before that, he'd operated as Walter Investment Group and Dominic and Associates Wealth Management. Same pattern every time. Open a company, collect client money, dissolve the LLC when people started asking questions. I pulled property records next. The office address on the business cards he'd probably shown Angela. A short-term executive rental in Tyson's Corner. Month-to-month lease. No assets in his name. No mortgage, no car registration, nothing. The guy was a ghost. A well-dressed, confident ghost who lived entirely off other people's money. I was pulling bank records, the ones I could access legally through cross-reference tax filings, when I heard footsteps behind me. Angela stood in the doorway of my office in her robe, eyes red from crying. The early morning light was just starting to filter through the windows. 6 a.m. maybe. I know you're angry, she said quietly. Angry doesn't begin to cover it, I replied, not turning from my computer. You had an affair. You gave away your inheritance. You brought a criminal into our home. Which part should I focus on? I didn't know he was. Richard, I thought he was legitimate. He showed me statements, returns, other clients. All fabricated. I cut her off. He's a con artist, Angela. A career criminal. His real name is Dominic Walter, and he's been running investment scams for at least a decade. Everything he showed you was fake. The returns, the clients, probably even that watch he wears. She sank into the chair across from my desk. God, I'm such an idiot. Yeah, you are. The harshness of my words made her flinch, but I didn't take them back. I was done being gentle. Done being the understanding husband who made excuses for her. What happens now? she asked. I finally turned to look at her. Really look at her. The woman I'd married 8 years ago felt like a stranger sitting in my office. That depends, I said. Do you want to try to save this marriage? I don't know. I thought I loved him. You thought you loved his money, I corrected. Money that doesn't exist. Angela, he targeted you. He found a woman with an inheritance, a husband he perceived as weak, and he played you perfectly. That's what con artists do. They find marks, and they exploit them. You're not weak, she said softly. I know, I replied. But you told him I was. You told him I was controlling, that I couldn't provide for you. You gave him ammunition to manipulate you with, didn't you? Her silence was answer enough. I need to know something, I said, leaning forward. Why? We had a good life. Not perfect, but good. Solid. Safe. Why wasn't that enough? Angela was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands. When she finally spoke, her voice was small. My friends kept posting about their vacations, their new houses, designer bags, expensive dinners, weekend trips to Europe. And I'd come home to this, to our 7-year-old furniture, and our budget grocery shopping, and your lectures about maxing out our 401k contributions. I felt like I was missing out on my own life, Richard, like everyone else was living and I was just existing. So you cheated. I know it was wrong. I don't care that you know, I interrupted, my voice going cold. I care that you did it anyway. I care that you valued Instagram posts over 8 years of marriage. I care that you let that man into our home and stood there while he called me broke and boring and insufficient. What are you going to do? She asked, and I heard real fear in her voice. I turned back to my computer screen where Dominic's history of fraud was laid out in neat rows of data. About us? I honestly don't know yet. I need time to figure out if there's anything left worth saving. I pulled up another screen, a template for filing a federal fraud complaint. About him? I'm going to destroy him completely. I'm going to find every person he's ever scammed, every dollar he's ever stolen, every lie he's ever told. And then I'm going to hand it all to the FBI and watch them tear his life apart. Angela started crying, quiet tears streaming down her face. I felt nothing looking at her. That numbness scared me more than the anger had. The realization that I could look at my wife sobbing and feel absolutely nothing at all. Richard, please, go, I said, not looking at her. I have work to do. She left without another word. I heard her footsteps retreating down the hall, heard the guest bedroom door close softly. Dawn broke fully through the office windows, painting everything in pale gold light. I picked up my phone and opened my work email. Subject, sick day. Richard Adamson. I need to take a personal day. We'll be back Monday. First sick day I'd taken in 3 years. Then I got back to work. Dominic Whitmore, Dominic Walter, whoever the hell he really was, he'd made one critical mistake. He'd underestimated the broke, boring accountant. And now that accountant was going to show him exactly what a forensic investigator could do when they had motivation, skills, and access to federal databases. I had a week. Time to make it count. Wednesday morning, I started building the case that would destroy Dominic Whitmore's life. I called in sick for the rest of the week. My supervisor accepted without question. I had 3 years of perfect attendance, so 1 week wouldn't raise flags. Then I got to work. The pattern was so clear it made me angry I hadn't seen it before. 3 LLCs in the past 5 years, all registered in Delaware. All dissolved within 18 months. Dominic would set up shop, create professional-looking websites and marketing materials, then start hunting for marks. His targets were specific: middle-aged women, divorcees with settlements, widows with insurance money, women like Angela with inheritances. He'd romance them, gain their trust, then pitch his exclusive investment opportunity. I found 4 victims in our state alone. 2 had filed police reports that went nowhere. Not enough evidence for criminal charges, the detectives said. 1 had sued him in civil court and won a judgment for $85,000 she'd never collect because Dominic owned nothing. The shell companies were worthless by the time judgments came through. The 4th victim was named Carla Adamson. No relation, just the universe's cruel sense of irony. I called her on Thursday afternoon. She picked up on the 3rd ring. "Hello? Ms. Adamson. My name is Richard Adamson. I know this is going to sound strange, but I'm calling about Dominic Whitmore." Silence. Then, "How did you get this number?" "I'm a forensic accountant with the IRS. Dominic recently became involved with my wife, and I've been investigating his background. Your name came up in civil court records. I wanted to ask you about your experience with him." "He stole everything from me," she said, her voice cracking. $200,000. My entire life savings. "I'm sorry," I said, and meant it. "Can you tell me what happened?" Over the next hour, Carla told me everything. She'd met Dominic at a coffee shop 18 months ago. He'd been charming, attentive, interested in her life. They'd dated for 3 months before he mentioned his investment business. He showed her statements from other clients, 15% annual returns, completely legitimate looking. "He said we could build a life together," Carla said. "That if I invested my savings, we'd have enough to buy a house, get married, start fresh." I trusted him completely. "When did he disappear?" 6 months after I gave him the money. I asked about withdrawing some of it for a down payment on a property we'd looked at. He said there was a penalty for early withdrawal, but he'd check. The next day, his phone was disconnected. His apartment was cleared out. Gone. "You filed a police report?" "They said it was a civil matter. I hired a lawyer, sued him, won. But the judgment's worthless. He doesn't own anything I can seize. The LLC was an empty shell." "What if I told you there might be another way?" I said. "A criminal prosecution instead of civil." "I already tried. The police wouldn't pursue it." "The police can't, but the FBI can. If I can prove Dominic's been running a systematic investment fraud scheme across state lines, that's federal wire fraud. That's criminal, not civil. And if he's convicted, victims can file for restitution." Carla's breath caught. "You can do that?" "I can try, but I need your help. I need documentation. Every statement he gave you, every text message, every email, anything that proves the relationship and the financial transactions." "I kept everything," she said immediately. "I couldn't let go. Part of me kept hoping I'd find a way to make him pay." "You will," I promised. "We both will." Over the next 2 weeks, I became obsessed. Carla sent me everything. 6 months of text messages where Dominic promised marriage, dozens of fabricated investment statements, bank records showing her wire transfer of $200,000. I found 2 more victims willing to come forward. Patricia Montgomery had lost $60,000. Emily Rodriguez had lost $45,000. Money meant for her daughter's college tuition. The pattern was identical every time. Romance, trust, investment pitch, fabricated returns, then disappearance. I subpoenaed bank records using my IRS credentials. Legally gray area, but I didn't care anymore. The records showed exactly what I expected. Deposits from clients, immediately followed by personal expenditures. Luxury apartment rentals, expensive dinners, car payments, gifts for the next victim in line. Angela watched me work each evening. She'd moved into the guest room without me asking, sleeping there in silence. We barely spoke anymore, except for necessary logistics. One night, maybe 10 days into my investigation, she appeared in my office doorway, holding a glass of whiskey. "You haven't eaten today," she said quietly. "Not hungry." She set the glass on my desk. "Richard, how much longer are you going to do this?" "Until it's done. He's not worth it. Just let him go. We can get divorced. You can move on with your life. This isn't about you anymore, I said, cutting her off. I looked up at her for the first time. This is about Carla Adamson, who lost her entire life savings and now lives with her adult son because she can't afford rent. This is about Emily Rodriguez's daughter, who had to drop out of college because the tuition money's gone. This is about stopping a predator before he finds his next victim. You sound obsessed. I am obsessed, I agreed. But I'm also right. And when I'm done, Dominic Whitmore is going to federal prison for a very long time. Angela stared at me. What happened to you? You used to be kind. I used to have a wife who didn't cheat on me, I replied coldly. People change. She left, without another word. 2 weeks after I'd started, late on a Wednesday night, I finished compiling the evidence file. 400 pages of documentation, bank records, victim statements, email trails, text messages, corporate filings, the entire pattern of Dominic's operation laid out in meticulous detail. I sat back in my chair, staring at the thick folder on my desk. Tomorrow, I'd take this to the FBI. Tomorrow, Dominic's world would start collapsing. I picked up the whiskey Angela had left and finished it in one swallow. The FBI's Financial Crimes Unit operated out of a downtown field office in a building that looked more like a corporate headquarters than law enforcement. I walked in Monday morning carrying my folder and thumb drive, feeling the weight of 2 weeks' obsessive work in my hands. Special Agent Douglas Harrison met me in the lobby. We'd worked together 2 years ago on a tax evasion case where my forensic analysis had cracked open a network of shell companies. He owed me a favor, and we both knew it. "Richard," he said, shaking my hand. "You sounded serious on the phone." "Investment fraud case," I said. 5 victims across 3 states. Estimated total loss around $500,000. Douglas's eyebrows went up. "That's a federal case. What's your interest?" "One of the victims is my wife." His expression shifted immediately. "Ah, and the subject?" "Also my wife's boyfriend. Ex-boyfriend." "Jesus, Richard." We walked to his office. I dropped the folder on his desk with a heavy thud, then handed him the thumb drive. "Everything's documented," I said. "Bank records, victim statements, corporate filings, communication records. The pattern's clear. He targets women with money, romances them, takes their cash for fake investments, then disappears." Douglas started flipping through the pages. I watched his face change from skeptical to interested to genuinely impressed. "You built this yourself? In 2 weeks?" I was motivated. "Clearly." He looked up. "This is good work, Richard. Really good. If even half of this holds up under scrutiny, we can get indictments for wire fraud, securities fraud, probably money laundering. How fast can you move?" "Fast. But you need to understand. You can't be involved beyond this moment. You're a witness now, maybe a victim by proxy. You hand me this file and you step back completely." "I don't need to work the case," I said. "I just need you to arrest him." Douglas moved faster than I'd expected. By Wednesday, he had an arrest warrant. By Friday morning, Dominic Whitmore was in federal custody. I wasn't there when they picked him up. Douglas made sure of that. But I got the details later. Coffee shop in the nice part of town. Dominic was having a business meeting with a widow in her 50s, probably grooming her the same way he'd groomed Angela and the others. The magistrate judge denied bail at the initial hearing. Flight risk, given Dominic's pattern of dissolving businesses and disappearing between scams. No property, no ties, just a string of fake names and empty promises. He was going to sit in jail until trial. Friday evening, Angela came home looking pale and shaking. I was in the kitchen making dinner, just for myself these days, when she walked in. "Richard, what did you do?" I didn't look up from chopping vegetables. "What needed to be done?" "He's in jail, federal jail. They're saying he might face 20 years. "Good. Good." Her voice went shrill. "Richard, this is insane." "Yes, he lied to me. But you've destroyed his entire life." I slammed the knife down hard enough that the cutting board jumped. He destroyed his own life. He destroyed 4 other women's lives. He tried to destroy mine. I just made sure he faced consequences for it. You're using your job to go after him because you're jealous. I'm using my job to prosecute a criminal. I cut her off. Because that's what my job is. And if you're still defending him after everything you know, then you need to take a hard look at yourself, Angela. She stared at me like I was a stranger. What happened to you? You used to be kind. I used to have a wife who didn't cheat on me with a con artist, I shot back. Things change. The following Monday, I filed for divorce. My attorney, Rochelle Robinson, sharp, efficient, someone I'd worked with on a case years ago, handled everything with clinical precision. No-fault divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. No kids made everything simpler. Angela didn't contest it. She just signed the papers when they arrived and started packing. You're being generous with the division, Rochelle noted during one of our meetings. You could argue she wasted marital assets. I just want it over, I said. The money's gone. Let it go. Angela moved out on Tuesday, exactly 1 week after Dominic's arrest. Her sister Jenny came with a rental truck. I stayed in my office while they loaded boxes, not wanting to see it. Not wanting to feel whatever I was supposed to feel watching 8 years disappear into cardboard. When they finished, Angela appeared in my doorway one last time. I'm sorry, she said quietly, for all of it. I looked at her, really looked at her, and felt absolutely nothing. I know you are, I replied, but sorry doesn't fix anything. She left. I heard the truck pull away 15 minutes later. The house felt bigger, emptier, and somehow cleaner all at once. The federal courthouse felt colder than it should have in mid-December. I sat in the back row of the gallery, watching Dominic Whitmore shuffle into the courtroom in an orange jumpsuit and chains. He looked smaller than I remembered. The expensive suit was gone, replaced by prison-issued clothing that hung awkwardly on his frame. The salt and pepper hair that had looked so distinguished in my bedroom now needed cutting. Without the trappings of wealth he'd stolen, he was just another middle-aged con artist facing consequences. Judge Thomas Clarkson entered, and we all stood. Stern man, late 60s, with the kind of face that had seen every excuse and believed none of them. The hearing moved quickly. Assistant U.S. Attorney Greg Sanders, young guy, maybe 35 but sharp as hell, laid out the government's case with methodical precision. Your Honor, the defendant operated a sophisticated fraud scheme targeting vulnerable individuals across multiple states. We have documented evidence of fabricated investment credentials, fake account statements, and fraudulent business registrations. 5 victims are prepared to testify. Bank records show a clear pattern. Client deposits followed immediately by personal expenditures including luxury rentals, expensive dinners, and gifts for subsequent victims. Dominic's public defender, Kenneth Wright, looked tired, overworked and underpaid, handling too many cases with too few resources. He stood reluctantly. Your Honor, my client maintains his innocence. These were legitimate business transactions that unfortunately didn't yield the expected returns. Mr. Whitmore has no prior criminal convictions, and the prosecution's characterization of him as a flight risk is— Counselor, Judge Clarkson interrupted. Your client has dissolved 3 separate business entities in 5 years, maintains no fixed address, and has changed his legal name to avoid civil judgments. How exactly is he not a flight risk? Wright had no good answer. The defense respectfully requests bail be set at a reasonable amount. Motion denied, Clarkson said flatly. The defendant remains in custody pending trial. Next case. That was it. 30 minutes of presentation, 5 minutes of argument, and Dominic was being led back to his cell. But before the marshals took him through the door, his eyes swept the gallery and landed on me. I didn't look away. I wanted him to see me there, wanted him to know exactly who'd done this to him. His face twisted with pure rage. He mouthed something. I couldn't hear it over the courtroom noise, but I could read his lips clearly enough. "You're dead." I smiled. The marshals pulled him through the door, and he was gone. 2 weeks before Christmas, Angela called. I almost didn't answer. But something, curiosity maybe, or the need for closure, made me pick up. "Richard, can we talk?" "We're getting divorced, Angela. Our lawyers can talk. Please, just please. I need to say some things." Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her at a Starbucks halfway between my house and her sister's place. She looked terrible. 20 pounds thinner, at least, with dark circles carved under her eyes like someone had pressed thumbs into her face. The woman sitting across from me barely resembled the one who'd sat on our bed next to Dominic 3 months ago. "Thank you for meeting me," she said quietly. "You have 20 minutes. She flinched at my tone but nodded. I wanted to apologize. Really apologize, not just say the words. I was selfish, and stupid, and cruel. You didn't deserve what I did. No, I didn't. I thought Dominic was going to give me this better life, this exciting, wealthy, glamorous life. And instead, he was using me, like I was using you." I sipped my coffee and said nothing. "My sister says I need therapy," Angela continued. "She's probably right. I don't know when I became this person who values money over people, but somewhere along the way I did. And I hate it. Therapy's a good idea." "Do you hate me?" The question hung between us. I could have lied to be kind, but I was done being kind. "No," I said honestly. "I don't hate you, Angela. I hate what you did. I hate that you threw away our marriage for a fantasy. But I don't hate you. I don't love you anymore either." She started crying. Quiet tears she wiped away quickly. "I understand." "Do you?" I leaned forward. "Because I don't think you do. You didn't just cheat, Angela. You betrayed every promise we made to each other. You let another man into our home, into our bed. You gave him money we'd saved together. And when I caught you, your first instinct wasn't to apologize. It was to defend him." "I know. I'm not finished," I said coldly. "You want absolution. You want me to tell you it's okay, that you made a mistake, but you're still a good person. I can't give you that. You made choices, adult choices, and those choices have consequences. The consequence is that our marriage is over, and you get to live with knowing you're the one who ended it." She sobbed openly now, covering her face with her hands. Other customers were staring, but I didn't care. "I'm sorry," she choked out. "I'm so sorry." "I know you are," I said, standing. "But sorry doesn't fix anything. Divorce papers will be final next month. After that, we're done. No contact, no friendship, nothing. You move on with your life, I move on with mine." I left her crying at the table. I walked to my car in the December cold, got in, and sat there for a minute. I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no anger, no sadness. Just empty. Maybe that was closure. Or maybe I was just numb. Either way, it was over. I drove home. Work became my refuge. I threw myself into cases through January and February with an intensity that worried my colleagues but impressed my supervisors. I stayed late, volunteered for complex audits, cleared backlog like I was trying to outrun my own thoughts, which, honestly, I was. By mid-February, my supervisor called me into his office. For a second, I thought maybe I'd overdone it, burned myself out visibly enough that HR had noticed. Instead, he offered me a promotion. "Senior forensic accountant," he said, sliding the paperwork across his desk. $95,000 annually. You've earned it, Richard. Your case closure rate this quarter is the highest in the division. I signed without hesitation. $95,000. Dominic had called me broke, and now I was making more money than I ever had in my life. The irony wasn't lost on me. Rochelle called that same week with advice that had nothing to do with the divorce. "You need to see a therapist," she said bluntly. Not because you're falling apart. You're actually handling this better than most people would. But the judge might ask about your emotional state during proceedings. It helps if you can show you're processing this healthily. I'm processing fine. Richard, you're working 16-hour days and sleeping 4 hours a night. That's not processing. That's avoiding. She had a point. She referred me to Dr. Diane McKinley, a woman in her 60s who practiced downtown and specialized in trauma and relationship dissolution. I showed up to my first session the following Tuesday with zero expectations and a lot of skepticism. Dr. McKinley didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Tell me about Dominic," she said, settling into her chair. "What about him? How do you feel about what you did to him?" I thought about it. "Proud." "Proud," she repeated. Interesting choice of words. "Should I be ashamed?" I asked. "He hurt people." I stopped him. "That feels good." "I didn't say you should be ashamed. I asked how you feel, and you said proud. That's honest." We sat in silence for a moment. "And your wife?" Dr. McKinley continued. "How do you feel about her?" "Ex-wife, almost." "I feel nothing, and that scares me." "Why does it scare you?" "Because I loved her for 8 years, and now she's just gone from my heart, like she never existed." Dr. McKinley nodded slowly. "That's called protective detachment. Your mind is insulating you from the pain of loss. It's a defense mechanism. Sounds healthy enough." "It's functional," she corrected. "But eventually, you'll need to feel it to heal from it. You can't stay numb forever, Richard." "What if I don't want to heal?" I asked. "What if I want to stay angry?" "Then you'll stay broken," she said simply. "Your choice." By March, I decided to try dating again. Not because I felt ready. I didn't, not really. But because staying alone in my house every night was starting to feel like its own kind of prison. I downloaded a couple apps, swiped through profiles, agreed to coffee dates and dinners with women who seemed nice enough on screen. Most of the dates were fine, polite, forgettable. Then I matched with Marianne Jensen. She was a nurse at the local hospital, 33, divorced with no kids. Her profile was funny without trying too hard, no inspirational quotes or heavily filtered photos, just a woman who looked comfortable in her own skin. We agreed to meet at an Italian place downtown on a Saturday night. I showed up expecting another awkward evening of forced conversation and premature excuses to leave early. Instead, I found myself laughing for the first time in months. Marianne was sharp, funny, and refreshingly honest. When I told her I was recently divorced, she didn't pry, just nodded and said she got it. "What about you?" I asked. "How long have you been divorced?" "1.5 years," she said, twirling pasta on her fork. "My ex-husband was more interested in video games than our marriage. No drama, no cheating, no big fight. We just grew apart, signed papers, split our stuff, done." "That sounds healthy." "It was boring," she admitted with a grin. "Sometimes I wish there'd been something to be angry about. At least then I'd feel justified in ending it." I understood that more than she knew. We talked through dinner, then coffee after. By the time we said goodnight, I'd already asked if she wanted to do it again. She said yes. Through March and into early April, Marianne and I saw each other regularly. Nothing serious yet, just dinners, walks, easy conversation that didn't require me to perform or pretend. She made me feel normal again, like I could be someone other than the guy whose wife cheated on him. The notification came in late March. Dominic's trial was scheduled for the first week of April. I'd be called as a witness on day 3. I spent the weekend preparing, reviewing my documentation, rehearsing my testimony, making sure every fact was airtight. This was it. The moment everything I'd built would either stand or collapse. I wasn't nervous. I was ready. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected. I'd testified in federal cases before, tax evasion mostly, but never as a victim. Never with this much riding on the outcome. When they called my name on day 3, I walked to the stand and raised my right hand. "Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?" "I do." Greg Sanders stood from the prosecutor's table, buttoning his suit jacket. He'd prepped me the week before, told me to stay calm, answer directly, let the evidence speak. "Mr. Adamson," he began, "can you tell the court how you first became aware of Dominic Whitmore?" "I found him in my bedroom with my wife," I said. "They were having an affair." A ripple went through the gallery. Dominic sat stone-faced at the defense table, but I could see his jaw tighten. Greg led me through the discovery, coming home early, the confrontation, Dominic's claims about being a millionaire investment advisor. "And what did you do after this confrontation?" "I investigated him. That's what I do for a living. I'm a forensic accountant with the IRS. I find money people try to hide, trace financial crimes, identify fraud patterns." "And what did you find?" I laid it out methodically. No business registration, no SEC credentials, no legitimate client base, just a trail of dissolved LLCs, civil complaints, and victims who'd never recovered their money. "I found a pattern," I said. "Dominic targets vulnerable people, mostly middle-aged women with money. He romances them, gains their trust, promises exceptional investment returns, then vanishes when they ask questions." Greg nodded. "And in your professional opinion as a forensic accountant, was Mr. Whitmore operating a legitimate investment business?" "No," I said firmly. "He was running a Ponzi scheme. He had no credentials, no registered business, and no legitimate investment. He was simply taking money from victims and using it to fund his lifestyle until it ran out." I looked directly at Dominic as I said it. His face darkened, but he didn't look away. Kenneth Wright stood for cross-examination, looking tired before he even started. "Mr. Adamson, isn't it true that you have a personal vendetta against my client?" "Yes," I said calmly. "He had an affair with my wife and defrauded her of $40,000. I absolutely have a personal interest in seeing him convicted." Wright seemed surprised by my honesty. "And isn't it possible that this personal interest has colored your professional judgment?" "No. The evidence speaks for itself. 5 victims, $500,000 in losses, fabricated credentials, dissolved businesses. These are facts, not opinions." Wright tried a few more angles, suggesting I'd manipulated evidence, implying I was exaggerating, questioning my motives, but he had nothing real to work with. When I stepped down, Dominic stared at me with pure hatred. I stared back with nothing but cold satisfaction. The trial stretched for 2 weeks. One by one, the victims testified. Carla Adamson broke down, describing how she'd lost her entire life savings, $200,000 she'd planned to retire on. Now she lived with her adult son, working part-time at 62 years old. Liza Hansen explained how Dominic had proposed marriage while stealing her divorce settlement. She'd suffered a nervous breakdown after he disappeared, racking up medical debt she couldn't pay. Emily Rodriguez, Angela's former co-worker, testified about missing her daughter's college tuition payment because Dominic promised to invest it for better returns. It was devastating. The jury looked horrified. Dominic's defense was weak. He claimed he'd made bad business decisions, not criminal ones, that he'd genuinely believed his strategies would work, that the victims had willingly given him money. No one believed him. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. Guilty on all counts: wire fraud, securities fraud, money laundering. I felt something loosen in my chest when the foreman read the verdict. Not quite relief, more like validation. Angela called me the next evening. "He was convicted," she said, her voice hollow. "I know. I was there. Richard, they're saying he could get 20 years. Could get. Probably will get 15 with good behavior. Still a long time. I can't believe this is real." "Well, it is," I said, "and you need to move on. We both do." "I lost my job," she blurted out. That stopped me. What? My boss found out about the trial, about my involvement. He said it reflected poorly on the company to have an employee who'd been duped by a con artist. They let me go last week. Angela, that's probably illegal. I don't care, she said tiredly. I don't have the energy to fight it. But there's more. I waited. The prosecutor is looking at charging me too, as an accessory. My blood went cold. What? Dominic named me in his plea negotiations, said I helped recruit Emily Rodriguez. She was my co-worker, Richard. I introduced them at a company party. I told her how great his returns were. Greg Sanders thinks I was helping him find marks. Were you? I asked, my voice hard. No! I mean, I didn't know it was a scam. I genuinely thought, but you did introduce them. You did vouch for him. Yes, she whispered. And now they're saying I benefited from the scheme because he bought me gifts, took me on trips, all funded by stolen money. They're talking about wire fraud conspiracy charges, Richard. I could go to prison. Part of me felt savage satisfaction. Another part felt nothing at all. Then you need a lawyer, I said flatly. I can't afford one. The public defender says I'm looking at 5 years minimum if they charge me. That's not my problem anymore. Richard, please. Please what, Angela? You want me to help you? After everything? You cheated on me. You stole from our marriage. You brought a criminal into our home. And now you're facing consequences for helping that criminal hurt other people. What exactly do you think I owe you? Nothing, she sobbed. You owe me nothing. I don't know what to do. Figure it out, I said, and hung up. 2 weeks after the verdict, Rochelle called me with an update. Your ex-wife's been formally charged, she said. Wire fraud, conspiracy, and money laundering. The prosecutor's offering a plea deal. 3 years in federal prison in exchange for testimony against Dominic. But she'd have to allocate and admit guilt. Will she take it? Her public defender is advising her to. If she goes to trial and loses, she's looking at 8 to 10 years. 3 is actually merciful. When does she have to decide? Next week. I thought about it. 3 years. Angela would be almost 40 when she got out, with a felony record, no career prospects, and no money. Thanks for letting me know, I said. Richard, I have to ask, how do you feel about this? Honestly? I feel like justice is being served. She made choices. Adult choices. Now she gets to face adult consequences. Dominic's sentencing hearing in May was packed. All 5 victims were there, along with their families. I sat in the back row next to Carla Adamson, who'd become something like a friend over the past months. Judge Thomas Clarkson listened to the victim impact statements first. Carla went first, describing how she'd lost her home and now lived with her adult son. Emily talked about her daughter having to drop out of college. Liza explained her medical debt from a nervous breakdown after Dominic disappeared. Then Greg Sanders asked if I wanted to make a statement. I hadn't planned to, but I found myself walking to the podium. Your Honor, I said, I'm not a victim in the traditional sense. I didn't give Dominic Whitmore money, but he did seduce my wife, convince her to invest her inheritance with him, and then stand in my bedroom and call me broke while explaining why my marriage wasn't good enough. So while I didn't lose money, I lost something else. I lost my trust in people. I lost my marriage. And I lost months of my life to anger and pain. I looked directly at Dominic. But I gained something too. I gained the satisfaction of knowing that men like you don't win. That eventually someone notices, someone investigates, someone stops you. And I'm grateful I got to be that someone. Judge Clarkson nodded approvingly. Dominic's face was stone. When it was time for sentencing, the judge didn't mince words. Mr. Whitmore, you are a predator. You targeted vulnerable people, exploited their trust, and stole their futures. You showed no remorse, no accountability, and no indication you would stop if given the opportunity. This court sentences you to 18 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years supervised release. You are further ordered to pay restitution to your victims in the amount of $473,000, to be garnished from any future earnings. 18 years. Dominic would be 63 when he got out, with no money, no career, and a felony record. He was led away in handcuffs. I felt nothing but relief. Angela's plea hearing happened 2 weeks after Dominic's sentencing. I attended that too, sitting in the same back row. She looked destroyed, 20 pounds thinner, hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, wearing a cheap suit that hung off her frame. When she stood before Judge Clarkson, her hands were shaking. "Ms. Adamson," the judge said, "you've agreed to plead guilty to 1 count of wire fraud conspiracy. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor," Angela said, her voice barely audible. "And you understand that by accepting this plea, you're admitting that you knowingly participated in a scheme to defraud victims?" "Yes, Your Honor. I introduced Dominic Whitmore to Emily Rodriguez. I told her he was a legitimate investor. I vouched for him based on fabricated statements he'd shown me. I didn't know it was a scam at first, but when I started to suspect, I didn't say anything. I didn't warn anyone. I just kept accepting the gifts and trips he bought with stolen money." Her voice broke. The judge's expression remained stern. "The court accepts your plea of guilty, taking into account your cooperation with prosecutors and your lack of prior criminal history. I sentence you to 3 years in federal prison, followed by 2 years supervised release. You are further ordered to pay $20,000 in restitution to the victims." 3 years. Angela would lose everything: her freedom, her career, her reputation, any chance at the life she'd dreamed of. As the marshals led her away in handcuffs, she looked at me. I held her gaze without flinching. She'd wanted more. Now she had nothing. My divorce from Angela was finalized in June. We met one last time to sign the final papers in Rochelle's office. Angela was in handcuffs, accompanied by 2 federal marshals who'd transported her from the detention center where she was being held pending transfer to her prison facility. She looked even worse than at her sentencing, hollow-eyed, pale, defeated. "I got a new job," she said quietly, and for a moment I was confused before I realized she was trying to make conversation, trying to pretend this was normal. Nothing glamorous, just administrative work. But it's a start. Then she seemed to realize what she'd said, talking about a job she'd already lost, a future that was gone. "I mean, I had a job. Before." Her voice cracked. We signed the papers in silence. Rochelle notarized them. Just like that, 8 years of marriage were legally over. The marshals stood to take Angela back. She stopped at the door. "Richard, I know I don't have the right to ask this, but are you happy?" I thought about it honestly. Getting there. I'm dating someone. Marianne. She's a nurse. It's early, but it feels good. Real, you know? Angela's face crumpled, but she nodded. "I'm glad. You deserve that." "So did you," I said. "Once. Before you made the choices you made." The marshals led her away. I never saw her again. By August, Marianne and I were officially together. She met my friends. I met hers. We took a weekend trip to the coast and talked about the future in vague, hopeful terms. Marianne moved in with me in October. It felt fast, but also right. She didn't have ghosts haunting our bedroom. We could build something new together without the weight of past betrayals. We talked about engagement over dinner one night, both of us grinning like idiots, both of us knowing this was heading somewhere permanent. Jenny called me in November. "I thought you should know," she said. "Angela tried to kill herself last month. Pills she'd been hoarding from the medical unit." My chest tightened. "Is she?" "She's alive. She's in psychiatric observation now. But Richard, she's not doing well. She's lost everything. Her freedom, her reputation, her future. Other inmates found out she helped con a woman out of her daughter's college fund. They don't treat her kindly. I'm sorry to hear that, I said. And I meant it. Sort of. Are you, though? Jenny asked bitterly. You got exactly what you wanted. Dominic in prison, Angela in prison. Your revenge complete. I got justice, I corrected. There's a difference. Is there? Because from where I'm standing, you destroyed 2 people's lives. No, I said firmly. They destroyed their own lives. I just made sure they faced consequences. Angela made choices, Jenny. She chose to cheat. She chose to steal marital funds. She chose to help Dominic find his next victim. Those were her choices, not mine. Jenny was quiet for a long moment. She asks about you sometimes. Whether you're happy, whether you hate her. Tell her I don't think about her at all, I said. Tell her I've moved on to a better life with a better person. Tell her that's what she wanted for herself. And I hope prison gives her time to reflect on why she never deserved it. I hung up before Jenny could respond. I got promoted again in December. Lead forensic accountant. The raise pushed me past 6 figures for the first time in my career. I proposed to Marianne on a beach in Hawaii during our Christmas vacation. She said yes immediately, laughing and crying at the same time. It's been 6 months since Dominic was sentenced. 6 months since Angela stood in that courtroom and admitted what she'd done. Dominic's serving year 1 of 18 in a federal prison in Pennsylvania. Angela's serving year 1 of 3 in West Virginia. And me? I wake up next to Marianne every morning. I go to work, making over $100,000 a year. I plan my wedding. I live my life. Every single day, I think about them in their cells. Every single day, I sleep perfectly at night. That's not revenge. That's justice. I hope you found that story powerful. Leave a like on the video and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. I have handpicked 2 stories for you that are even more powerful. Have a great day.